we're going to continue discussing the Thelemic philosophy, the occult philosophy of Thelema on the broadcast today. I'm going to pick up where we left off last week and jump ahead to, we had just completed talking about not only Thelemic gematria or occult numerology and the significance and the importance and the allegoric significance of the number occult numerological system that is often used in the Thelemic philosophy to represent ideas and to create correlative thinking between number and philosophy, number and conceptualized concepts that are covered in the philosophy of Thelema. This is done in many occult traditions. It's done in Freemasonry, it's done in Kabbalah, and it's absolutely a crucial part of the Thelemic philosophy. We closed up last week talking about what magic is in Thelema and how it is a form of mental influence. It is a form of action at a distance. We looked at the symbology of Thelema in things like the unicursal hexagram. We'll continue to look at some symbology today because symbology is rich in the tradition of Thelema as well. And we talked about magic versus sorcery. That if the influence that you're attempting to exert and to inspire others using to convey your knowledge to them through mental influence, through setting an example in your life and inspiring others, that is a form of magic. That is what I call higher magic. That is what many occult practitioners have called higher magic. We're not talking about invocation of spirits and casting spells. That is what is known in the occult world as lesser magic. That is what I certainly consider the lesser form of magic, because often that is done to manipulate something according to the way you want to see it go. It's often done to acquire resources. It's done to placate and or satiate the lesser will, the individual selfish will of the practitioner. That's not what I consider real magic. That's not what true Thelemites consider real magic. That's not what higher level occultists truly consider genuine magic. That is what has been known in the different occult traditions throughout the years as lesser magic. And it is a form of quote-unquote magic. It is a form of the art and science of influencing change to occur. But however, most of that type of change in lesser magic is occurring in accordance with the earthly appetites and the earthly will. My will, not thy will, not the will of creation, not the will of the universe, not the will of the cosmos. When we put our intention and effort into allowing the expression and the culmination and the fulfillment of the will of the cosmos, then we are aligning our individuated will with the capital W will, the higher will of creation. And therefore that is doing the true will. And that is what is referred to in the occult as greater magic, higher magic. And that's the magic that we're talking about in the Thelemic tradition. When very advanced occult practitioners, who I would refer to as higher level dark occultists, who Crowley and many other occultists in the 19th and 20th centuries referred to as sorcerers, when they are exercising their own selfish will, that's not real magic. That is what is delineated in the Thelemic tradition as sorcery, as the lesser form of magic, the selfish will of the practitioner being used to influence and bring other people into harmony and accordance with, so that the selfish practitioner gets their way and their will is fulfilled. That's not what we're talking about when we say, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. We're talking about the capital W will, the higher will of creation. That is, it is our charge in our spiritual lives to align our behaviors to. And so we talked about that as being the delineating factor, the factor that separates true magic, as Crowley spelled it and, worded it magic with a K, higher magic, from the lesser will influence, the art and science of influencing change to occur in accordance with the selfish will of the practitioner, which he and many other occultists of his day referred to as sorcery. And that is what I would call it, and I would call it dark occultism as well. So the last concept that we left off on, which I'm going to go ahead and jump right over to, was the concept in Thelema of the holy guardian angel. And this is a concept of connection to that higher self that helps you to align your behavior to the higher will of creation, to the higher will of the cosmos. And Crowley worded this in the writings that he put forward about the holy guardian angel as it was a force of guidance. It was a force of intelligence that if we were aligning our behavior and our intent with the true will, that this force of creation would guide us on that path and help us to stay on that path and not fall from it. Clearly, Crowley himself did not do that. And that is why it is of utmost importance to learn how to separate the way an individual in physicality, in the 3D world here on Earth, lives their life versus what some of the teachings that they have presented during the course of their life are, and the value that those teachings have for others. Therefore, I would be the very last person to tell you, go and revere Crowley himself. Not a good idea. I am the last person who would tell you, become what is known as a Crowleyite, right? Someone that reveres Crowley, puts him up on a pedestal, looks up to him, glorifies him. Bad idea. The man himself fell from the spiritual path and was not living according to the principles and philosophy of true Thelema and the true Thelemic philosophy. Absolutely not. I don't tell you to put me up on a pedestal and revere and glorify me. I'm not interested in that. I could care less. I want you to understand natural law. That's what all the occult traditions are there to help you do. They're there as a system of correspondences, a system of allegories, a system of general guidance and teachings to help to understand natural law, how it works, and to bring one's behavior into accordance with it in such a way that we desist in continuing to create self-inflicted suffering for ourselves and others. As is said in the Thelemic philosophy, there is no God but man. And that doesn't mean that there's not a God of creation that created the universe and the laws of creation and set the laws of creation into effect. There is no small g God except capital M man. What does that mean? Well, we're actually going to talk about that later today when I break down the document Liber Oz, which I will be doing on this show. It's the seminal text of Thelema, and it's the culmination of Thelema, quite frankly. We'll be getting to that later. But just as a prelude to that, there is no God but man simply means we're the ones doing it to ourselves through our own behavior. Through the way we think and through our behavior that we put out into the world, we're enslaving ourselves in the aggregate as a species. Humanity is doing that to humanity. Okay? You could talk all you want about, yes, there may be external forces at work. There may be non-terrestrial forces at work. I'm not going to dismiss that. I'm the last person that's going to dismiss that and treat that like some kooky conspiracy theory. I believe there has been absolute intervention. I'm sorry, not even intervention, but interference with the natural progression of human evolution on this planet by perhaps non-terrestrial, non-human entities. We talked about that. We've speculated on that a lot here on What on Earth is Happening. I don't dismiss those theories at all. There's quite frankly lots of evidence available in human history to back it up, to back up those theories. However, what I will say is It doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter, because if we put our intent and our behavior into alignment with the true will of creation, mighty forces come to our assistance, and then we learn what not to do. We learn what to do, we learn what not to do, and then we become intelligent in the way that we stop creating that self-inflicted suffering, and we're no longer doing it to ourselves. There's no small g God creator of the human experience except capital M, man, mankind, humankind. All of humanity in the aggregate is creating those experiences through our behavior that we put out into the universe, and then natural law brings the consequences to us that then we must live with in the aggregate shared reality that we call the human experience, that we call the human condition. It's very simple, quite frankly. It makes very much perfect sense, quite frankly. People will insist because of all the language that is used, they don't like it. Well, oh well. You know, there's only so many words to describe certain concepts in the world, and people put that together in often coded systems and allow people to try to decode it using their mental effort and will. And that's part of what Thelema is all about. Taking that very same tradition from Kabbalah and Freemasonry and Tarot and Rosicrucianism and other occult traditions. So Crowley's own view in his writings of what he called the Holy Guardian Angel is a deeper connection to the higher self, which guides us on the path of the true will. It guides us toward our real and true purpose in life that will lead to our maximum benefit and our maximum freedom. And that then puts us on the path to maximum efficiency in our journey of evolution in the universe, in creation. In order for the Holy Guardian Angel to manifest, to come forward, to make its presence felt in our life, according to the Thelemic tradition, we first have to quiet the mind. And folks, this is what I've been really coming back to this over and over again, folks. It warrants belaboring upon this point. You see, the symbology of this, you know, the all-seeing eye of the Creator, the Kundalini energy of the serpent coming up the spine and opening up the crown chakra, the angel's wings, allowing us to truly come into harmony with natural law as a higher level force, and then serve that law, truly align our behavior to it. The symbology is fantastic in and of itself. Some people will look at that and go, oh, that's dark occult, that's Satanism. No, it isn't. That's positive occult symbology. You know, again, Ma'at's wings on the Lex Rex shirt, you know, the justice card of the tarot, you know, the Lex Rex, the law is king. These are all symbols of natural law. It's the exact same thing here with the symbolism of the Holy Guardian Angel in Thelema. And again, this isn't official symbolism. It's some, you know, Thelemites come up with different symbolic concepts to represent certain things. However, I think this is highly appropriate symbolism, representing Kundalini energy of awakening, representing the third eye coming online in the, third eye chakra, the mind awakening to higher level understanding of natural law. And again, that being a reflection of the Creator's light coming into the world, the all-seeing eye of the Creator and its laws. And then again, the wings of the guardian angel, providing protection if one is on that path and stays upon it. Fulfilling the purpose, fulfilling the higher will of creation, getting in touch with that force of law and the force which moves us forward evolutionarily. That is the very force of evolution itself that fights against the involutionary force, that grindstone that sharpens the blade of the practitioner. You know, there has to be something pushing back, a force that one has to sort of put its will against in order to move forward, in order to self-direct one's evolutionary progress as that small g creator. Not capital G God, small g God creator. Okay? Again, in that sense, there is no external force truly directing our evolution but ourselves in the aggregate sense right now. Biological evolution got us up to this point. Now it's up to our mental effort and will to push our epigenetic evolution forward against the entropic or involutionary force that is trying to stop that from happening, and that is the dark occult. And that is, potentially other forces at work that want to subvert our evolutionary progress. Crowley and Thelemites look at getting in touch with the true will as bringing forward the evolutionary force of creation to assist us. It would be putting ourselves in the position of the hangman card on the tarot, which sits at the right-hand side of the justice card, the king of creation, natural law itself. And the hangman card would be the servant of natural law. And that is when the holy guardian angel expresses itself in Thelemic terms. But for it to come forward and present itself to us in our lives as a protective influence, as a protective guiding force, we first have to quiet the chatter of our mind. Again, I've been hammering on this week after week after week. You have to close the yapping of the mind. You have to learn techniques. This is why meditative techniques, yogic techniques, techniques to gain mastery over the noise of the mind, which is so pervasive in the modern world. How to quiet external forces that are constantly competing for your attention. How many of us take the time to create space and silence, not have the phone constantly ringing and text messaging constantly going, not constantly sitting in front of a screen, quieting the mind to get the voice of intuition and the voice of guidance that is speaking all the time to us, but it never speaks above a low whisper. It's up to us to quiet the chatter of our minds, and that's where practices of the Thelemic tradition come into play that teach us those techniques for how to do that. Often learning can be inhibited. I talk about this constantly. You're not in a position to truly learn if the mind is constantly chattering and yapping. It makes it almost impossible. That's the ego saying, I want to speak. I want to be right. I don't want to listen. I don't want to truly learn. I want to be the one talking. See, at some point, what you have to do is simply stop. Part of the teachings of how to become the true media, one of the main things that we talk about, the very first concept that we teach is that concept is king. Forget tasks. Forget the task, right? If you don't understand the why, if you don't understand what you're trying to do, if you don't understand how you're going to go about doing it, right? Forget the task, right? The task is part of the how. Not going to say it's unimportant. But if you don't understand conceptually what you are attempting to put forth and actually accomplish and do, and the sub-series of tasks on how to get there, right? Because it's chunking of knowledge. And the occult does this all the time. It's a direct correlation between the world of occultism and learning the technology to do this. And that's why many occult practitioners who don't really truly understand technology or truly work with it are missing a gigantic aspect of the occult world and its teachings. And conversely, many people who are involved in technology and have no understanding of the occult, and that's most people in the tech world, also are missing tons and tons of correlations about how technology really works that you could more deeply understand and gain a better foothold and a more efficient approach to technology if you study occultism in conjunction with the tech world. You would be amazed at how completely together these two seemingly disparate and separate worlds truly go and how they mesh and almost operate as one unit. And the occultists know this. That's why they're technocrats, folks. It's not an accident. That's not on purpose. That's on purpose. That's not accidental. It doesn't just work out that way, okay? They are deliberately using technology because technology is part of the driving force of the will. But is it serving the true will or is it serving the selfish will? The dark occultists are using it to control and manipulate. Technology, techno-logos, technos, logos. Technos means hand in Greek. Logos means word. It is the ability to put out the word through the hand or through technical means. You see? So that is what the dark occult are doing. They are putting out their word, their lies, their disinformation, their action at a distance influence to the detriment of humanity through technology. And they got a big head start on us, folks. They've had the mind control device in every house, pumping the frequency of mind control into the brain since we popped out of the womb, since we were in the damn womb. You don't think that these people, these technocratic elites, these technocratic dark occult psychopaths know this? You don't think they understand all of these correlations? Of course they understand it because they know the occult, and most of us don't. And most of us still think all of this is just darkness. All of this is just Satanism. All of this is just something we should have no knowledge of. They're beating our asses mercilessly because we don't know this stuff. And because we don't take it seriously, and because we don't put it into practice, and because we're not putting our will behind it and putting our effort into learning the technology to spread the word through the actions of our hands and technology. This is what the whole True Media Seminar is coming together as a culmination of my work to help teach people how to do. And the people who have learned it, man, you guys are impressive and you're doing a fantastic job. For the people who are still slacking and you're way behind, you need to understand the importance of it. And this is part of what quiet the damn chatter of the mind. You got to learn the techniques in meditative tradition, in things like EFT, in things like, yoga, true yoga. In things like shadow work. And I'm talking about real shadow work. Heart-based shadow work. Sitting in front of the mirror. Not new age woo-woo stuff. Real self-transformative transpersonal techniques. They do teach this in the Thelemite tradition and in other occult traditions. And it's important to learn them. It really goes back to what I taught about at the very beginning of the Natural Law Seminar, to be honest. I started out teaching that seminar talking about teachability, the teachability index of the student, of the one receiving the information. And again, this directly correlates with Thelema. If you understand what Crowley was attempting to do with the writings and how he was setting up systems of correspondences and systems of correlative thinking, which I talk about in Demystifying the Occult, part 1 and 2. Correlative thinking is so important in expanding consciousness. It will literally take your IQ points up several points. That is how important understanding correlative thinking is. I could see this symbolic image here on the slide and immediately go into an essay on all of the things symbolically and correlatively and allegorically that the symbolism means in human life. And other people sit there and go, snake wing eye, snake wings and eye in a triangle. What's that? They have no correlative thinking skills. They don't even understand the importance of being able to relate symbolism to conceptual ideas, and how these occultists have been using this for thousands of years to communicate with each other and to subvert us, to use the symbolism in a subversive way to make us think a certain way, so then we go into their manipulation and we fall under their influence and we fall under their thrall, their mind control. Again, we could harken back to the idea of Betty Crocker's cake, right? Betty Crocker comes up with instant cake mix in the 50s. Housewives don't want it. They don't buy it. It's a failing product. They go to Madison Avenue, psychologists, campaign execs to understand occult archetypes and occult conceptual ideas, and they say they're feeling guilty. They're not putting any effort and love from themselves, from their own effort, into the making of the cake from scratch for their own beloved family members, and then they're feeling guilty. They don't want the quick answer. They want to put their creative energy into the work and make something of true value for their family. So, what did the advertising campaign executives come back with for Betty Crocker? Don't change your cake mix. Don't come up with something they really want. We'll psychologically make them want it for you. Add the instructions to the box, add an egg. Archetypally, the egg is the feminine essence. The oval of the egg is the feminine essence, right? And therefore, by proxy, by psychological proxy, by putting the egg into the cake mix, the woman is inserting her own feminine energy aspect, the creative aspect of the feminine, into then the product. And that assuages the guilt of not providing that creative essence for her family, because she's giving the very archetypal creative symbolic essence of the female, the egg, to the family members then. And therefore that makes it okay, and that assuages the guilt, and then cake mix flew off the shelves. That's the occult. That is the world of occultism, ladies and gentlemen. You know, not doing bonfires and throwing animals onto the bonfire out in the woods, in the clearing in the woods. That's not Satanism. You could say some Satanists will do practices like that, but let me tell you something. The vast majority are at work at a very high, deep, fundamental level of doing things like making people want to buy products that they don't really need or want, rather than going out into the woods and sacrificing animals. They're formulating whole strategies to get the population to cull itself by buying into a whole bunch of fucking nonsense and things that aren't true that the media is repeating over and over again as a mind control technique. And then for people to go and take poison that's a biological culling agent, you know? And the occultists are very much at work on that type of mental influence. That's real magic. That's their sorcery, but believe me, that's magic. That's action at a distance. You know, they're providing that, they're conducting that level of sorcery at a distance. And it's working brilliantly on the vast majority of the population. So quieting the mind through techniques is the first step of truly becoming a student of natural law, of computing, of the occult world. You got to be honest with yourself, stop lying to yourself, and you got to ultimately learn how to think. And that involves receiving those methods, receiving the methods of efficient learning. This is what we're going to teach in How to Become the True Media. You have to be able to quiet your mind and stop thinking according to the terms you may have been thinking. Empty the mind of what came before. This is valid in martial arts as well. If people have learned bad techniques in other martial arts, you really don't want them bringing techniques into a more efficient way of teaching something. For instance, Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee's system, his systemless system, his formless system, his free-flowing art of martial arts, the first form of MMA. He would rather have somebody come with an empty slate mind, with no previous knowledge of how they did things, because then the mind's chattering when he's showing them a technique. They're like, I learned a different way. I learned how to do it this way in the other school that I went to. And he's trying to show them, I've already been there, done that. It's inefficient. It doesn't truly really work. It may work in some instances, but if you want the fastest route to getting out of problems, if you want the fastest route to putting down your opponent, if you want the most efficient route to protecting your life and then getting out of there, you got to learn my technique, because I've studied it and I've compared and contrasted over a lot of time and a lot of different techniques, all of these different methods, and I've arrived at the most efficient in my experience and in my knowledge. And that's why at some point you got to extend a little bit of trust. This is what the Holy Guardian Angel is about. You quiet the mind, you extend trust to creation, right? It's one thing to extend trust to a teacher in the physical world. You could extend trust to me in teaching natural law. You could extend trust in teaching technology. You could extend trust to people who had considered themselves adepts in occult traditions. That's a matter of, human dynamics. But ultimately, what we're really doing is we're opening up and allowing, through the quieting of the mind, reception of natural law into the self. This is what Kabbalah is. That's why Kabbalah is such a huge, important part of Thelema. It's one of the integral traditions that helped formulate and influence Thelema. The word Kabbalah literally means to receive. It is a verb in ancient Hebrew. Kabbalah is the verb in ancient Hebrew that means to receive. It's an infinitive. Like in Latin, there are infinitive verbs. Habere means to have. Dictere, the infinitive, to speak. Occultare means to hide, to conceal, to keep secret. That's the infinitive form. Kabbalah, you could look at in ancient Hebrew as it is an infinitive form of the verb to receive. And Kabbalah teaches proper reception. It means preparing the mind in an efficient way to receive the knowledge of natural law, of the Creator's laws. Thelema is doing the same thing. It's no different in that regard. And the idea of preparing oneself for the reception of the influence of the Holy Guardian Angel, of the protection of the Holy Guardian Angel, is the techniques of quieting the ego, quieting the chatter, the endless chatter of the ego. So for this influence, this force to make its presence known in your life, you don't have to see this as a personal force, and I don't, and most Thelemites do not. It's not a personal force. It's not an actual angel, right? It's not an actual entity. It's a form of energy. That's what all of the occult ultimately is teaching us, how to work with energies within creation. If we really break them down, how do you energize the mind? How do you change the energy of the mind? That's magic. How do you get someone that was ultra resistant to now listen to the voice of wisdom and reason and take the truth into themselves and then start teaching it themselves? There's no greater form of magic than that. How many people do you think maybe I helped influence to do that? Obviously, they do that work ultimately to themselves, but did I influence that? Yes, that's magic. I helped influence that. I helped prepare that way. You can do the same thing if you take it seriously enough. That's what doing the will is. And a lot of Thelemites don't know this. That's the sad part. The sad part is I'm going to teach people more about what real Thelema is in two podcasts and two video episodes, podcast episodes, than in probably all the years that they ever studied Thelema. In a few audio broadcasts with some images, Freemasons wrote me and told me, you taught me more about Freemasonry than in my 20 plus years in my lodge system that I've been attending for over 20 years. I did not understand this. This knowledge, this truth did not enter me. I didn't receive it in 20 plus years in the lodge system of Freemasonry. And once again, some people have understood exactly what I said last week, and some people don't understand what I'm saying. I asked, let me finish this slide and then I'll reiterate that, because I want to go over it again, and I want the offer out on the table in a clearly understood way, because there's still people that don't understand what I asked for last week. I made a request last week about the lodge system of Freemasonry because of how connected this topic is actually with Freemasonry. A lot of the rituals are connected to it. A lot of the practices are connected to it. Much of the symbolism is very connected to it. So I'm going to repeat my request after I finish with this slide because it bears repeating. It's worth belaboring it and repeating it. So until we quiet the mind and we really listen to the wisdom of the force of creation that's always speaking to us, but it doesn't raise its voice. It's not like Mark Passio when he gets angry about the order followers, okay? It's not going to scream into the camera, right? Okay? That's me in my 3D body getting angry at people who still don't understand, right? And I'll raise my voice, make it very, 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 very unambiguously clear. Creation doesn't do that. First of all, doesn't need to, because it is the truth. I'm expressing the truth. I am not the truth. Creation itself is the actual truth, right? It doesn't need to do anything because it's what is, period. It doesn't care whether you don't understand. It doesn't need to care whether you don't understand. It's law. Law is unwavering, unbreakable, operates 100% flawlessly a certain way like a computer program, and it doesn't give a damn whether you don't understand it. It is there operating on cue to provide you the learning experience that it could go smoothly, or you could choose the way of maximum pain. And if you want to choose that, that's up to you. That's your free will choice. I think it's a pretty stupid thing to choose, but most people on this planet are choosing exactly that. If, on the other hand, we learn the techniques of quieting the mind through meditation, through yoga, through traumatic healing practices and shadow work, etc., then we learn to listen to this voice of wisdom. It quiets the ego, the chatter of the ego that's incessant, it's nonstop. And that force of entropy and involution is always trying to take us off our true path. It's always trying to get us not to do the true will. It's taking us off the path of wisdom and the path of the true will. And then what happens? We talked about that last week. When we're not on the path of true will, maximum resistance comes to us in our lives. Our lives become harder. It becomes things are put as obstacles in our path because we're not on the right path. And the universe puts obstacles in our path to try to nudge us back onto the right path. But as we become more calcified in the ego and more hard-headed and less willing to listen to that voice of wisdom, more and more obstacles arise. We go into total abject tyranny and slavery. And that's where we're at because of not listening to the voice of truth and insisting on constantly have that entropic voice of the ego chattering away in the mind so that it takes us off the place where we are in a maximum position to learn, to receive, to learn and to grow. So the holy guardian angel is the energetic pathway of listening to the voice of wisdom, aligning our behavior to the true will, getting on that true will, aligning our behavior to it, and staying there as opposed to falling off the path because our ego chatter becomes too incessant and we fall away from that path. So that's the entirety of the concept of the holy guardian angel. Crowley referred to his own energy, spirit, whatever you want to call it, his own holy guardian angel, Iwas, whose name in Greek gematria also adds up to the number 93. So again, in gematria terms, if numerologically the word adds up, the letters of the word assigned numerological equivalents, if the words add up to the same thing, it is taken to mean that they mean the same thing. They have the same meaning. So Thelema adds to 93. Agape, which means love. Thelema means will. Agape means love. It adds in Greek gematria also to 93. Iwas is a form of the holy guardian angel in Thelema. That name adds to 93. So they all mean the same thing. Higher will. Higher love, agape, the holy guardian angel, all interconnected, all ultimately meaning the same thing, being on the path of the true will, being on the path of evolution in creation, true evolution, being on the path of alignment with natural law. So let's move on to another concept in Thelema, which was out, O-U-T, getting out is a very important concept of freeing the mind, getting the mind out of mind control. And this is why Crowley emphasized this concept over and over again in his writings, that you had to get out, that this was an allegorical correlation to freeing oneself, getting out of a cage, right? If you're in a cage, you're under total control. You're behind bars. This is the prison of the mind. That's what he was referring to with out. But then, of course, this leads to physical freedom, because we're not only under the prison of the mind, we're under duress of the body. We are physically enslaved as well as mentally enslaved, and most people are spiritually enslaved. So, in some of his writings, Crowley referred to what he called the head cage. And this is literally having a mind that is completely controlled by religious concepts and cult-like concepts, erroneous cult-like brainwashing that people were clinging on to with religious fervor. And because they were doing that, they could not get on the path of the true will. That was the obstacle that was preventing them from aligning their behavior with the true will and serving it. So let's give an example of this before we break down the lettering and the symbolism of getting out, of escape from mind control, and specifically the numerology of the number 23 to represent that. And they kind of made a movie about it. I think it was Jim Carrey in the movie. It's called The Number 23, where he has to wrestle with the wrong that he has did and stop lying to himself about it in a very diseased way. And then when he does that, it begins the process of healing his personal trauma. Pretty interesting movie from a symbolic and allegorical point of view, dealing with the concept of the number 23, meaning get out of mental bondage. If you watch the movie again in that allegorical light, you'll see it completely differently. So, and it's also about not lying to yourself about what you've done that is harmful. So, going back to this concept, I briefly lost my train of thought there about the thing that I wanted to explain about Crowley, about Jack Parsons. So let's give the example of getting out, about Jack Parsons' life, right? Because if you read the books Strange Angel or Sex and Rockets about Jack Parsons' life, or if you watch the brilliantly put together period television piece called Strange Angel, which was named after the book, you'll understand that, especially early on in his exploration of Thelema, that Jack Parsons was very conflicted. He did not step upon the true will and follow it himself either. And many times he fell from the path of the will and would not listen to the influence of his guardian angel. And, or you could look at that as the higher self, the intuitive self, the intuitive force, the creative force, the imagination. Many ways of looking at it, okay? But if you don't listen to that guidance system, which is ultimately heart-based intelligence, which is ultimately conscience-based, if you don't listen to that, obstacles arise and you fall from your path. You're not with it. You're not operating in the true will. And I apologize for the noise, folks. It's another warm day here in Philly. I have the window open and the fan on. Hopefully it's not too badly distracting, but there is work going on right on the other side of this small street that I live on, so I apologize. If it comes through, it comes through. We'll have to just deal with it and make the best of it that we can, but it's just what it is. But going back to Parsons, if you read about this struggle that he had in staying on the true will path in his life, you could also get this from this kind of really struggle in his life to weed out inconsistencies in his own thoughts and behaviors. In the television series Strange Angel, they explain that he's basically trying to serve two masters, right? He wants to get more involved in the philosophy of Thelema and the occult tradition of Thelema. He wants to lead the Agape Lodge, the Agape Lodge. They say Agape in Strange Angel. They pronounce many things wrong. They say Thelema when it should be pronounced Thelema. They say Agape when it should be Agape. There's, different, inflection points or emphasis that should be placed on certain syllables. The word Agape is pronounced just as I just pronounced it. Agape. It's not agape. Agape. And then Thelema is with a long A sound in the second syllable, not Thelema. So, regardless of that, Parsons is trying to get a job with the military, right? He wants to be, working in military laboratories, inventing rocket propulsion, jet propulsion, and rocket propulsion. And this is very much in conflict with the workings that he really is supposed to be doing in the Agape Lodge system and Thelema in general. And the show depicts that. It's one of the actual reasons that the show went off the air. They presented Liber Oz, which I'm going to read here today, on network television, right? On CBS All Access, where this show aired. And that was it after that. The show was canceled very shortly thereafter because they hit people with probably the culmination of the occult world philosophically with Liber Oz. And they showed the conflict that this was not only creating between the Agape Lodge and military members who had attended at Parsons' behest, but it shows the conflict that was going on inside Parsons himself, because he wanted this military contracting job, which, he eventually took and went on to form NASA, went on to be one of the influencers that formed NASA. And, that highly conflicted and contrasted with his role of doing the true will in the world of Thelema and the Thelemic philosophy. So Parsons, as a early Thelemite, absolutely also struggled with issues of contradiction, where he was still walking in two worlds, not fully committing himself, not fully putting his energy and effort behind the Thelemic principles, and still very much attached to the 3D world and 3D goals, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do. You should have goals in the 3D world, especially when it comes to true freedom. But if you let worldly values, worldly judgments, worldly systems hold you back from your true will, you're not going to succeed in either realm. You're not going to succeed in the world of true spirituality and the true occult philosophy, nor are you going to succeed in the earthly world of having your true freedom and your true potential in the very real physical world. So I think the TV show Strange Angel does a very good job at portraying that, especially in the later episodes of the second season, showing that conflict that's going on internally in Jack Parsons' mind and how he was not getting out. He was not understanding the conceptual idea of release of the mind from its bars, from its prisons, and from serving two masters, and from inherent internal contradiction in the mind and inherent internal contradiction in one's behaviors, from what one knows one should be doing and aligning its behaviors to the true will versus not doing that and keeping the behaviors in accordance with worldly comfort and worldly goals. So, you could read those books or check out that television series, which depicts it very brilliantly in a very accurate 40s period piece, exceedingly well. I was very disappointed that it was canceled from television, because I was very interested in seeing how they were going to depict the relationship of Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard. The show was canceled on the episode. The last episode was L. Ron Hubbard shows up to Parsons' home, and he's going to enter the Agape Lodge, and that was the last episode. They canceled it after that because they don't want people really understanding Thelema. When they got into the philosophy of it, they're okay with showing Parsons' early life and his discovery of the lodge. They're fine with that. Once Liber Oz was read, that was the end of that show. And everybody knows it. Everybody who watched the seasons knows that's what did it in. It's pretty blatant. So this concept of getting out, the 23 skidoo, as we talked about in the numerological section last week. 23 skidoo is this old 20s and 30s phrase, 1920s and 30s. It means get out while the getting's good. Make your quick exit, quick escape. Ghost people. Just scoot on out of there while you can, especially if the situation's going to get uncomfortable, right? So it's like Crowley and the Thelemic tradition. It's telling you, get out of the mind control while you can, while the opportunity is available, while the information is here and available, before it gets even more draconian. And then it's going to be infinitely more of a challenge before there's more censorship, and it's going to be infinitely more of a challenge to get out of that mental hypnosis and that mental trance and thrall and mind control. Get out of the head cage. In one of Crowley's writings, it's book 23 or paragraph 23. When it's like book, it's like really chapter 23, let's say. Okay? And the title of it is Kephale KG or Kappa Gamma. So in Greek here, written under the heading, Kephale means head in Greek. Kappa, Epsilon, Phi, Alpha, Lambda, Eta are the Greek characters. Okay? So you pronounce that Kephale in Greek. And that means head. And then he writes in English in like a transliteration. There is no Greek word, Kappa Gamma, right? It's not a Greek word. They're just two Greek letters back to back. KG. So this is like an English green language cipher, right? So this is how he did things, right? Kephale, you'd have to learn the word, what the word means in Greek. You'd have to look that up in a Greek dictionary. It means head. So like cephalic means related to the head, right? So that's kephale in Greek, right? And then the English transliteration of Kappa Gamma is KG, right? Kephale KG. How would you pronounce K and G together? Cage, right? You would put that together as the English word cage. So kephale means head. KG transliterates symbolically in green language to the word cage. So kephale KG literally means the head cage. And this is how Crowley wrote. He set up these little ciphers to make you go and explore. Then maybe you'll learn a little bit more Greek and understand where the etymology of words comes from. Why are English words structured in a certain way? Because they come from the ancient Latin, which then formed the Romance languages. You have Italian and French and Portuguese and etc. And there's a couple others. And, then English comes out of those Romance languages largely. And again, from Greek, obviously, is one. And you'll go and look up things and you'll learn, and then you'll see symbolic associations and you'll see wordplay associations with just how words are spoken, and he's putting together a little mini cipher for you to figure out. Then it becomes a little bit of a challenge, and then the student gets engaged and it's like we're playing a game, right? And it inspires one to keep going. What's he going to come up with next? What am I going to have to figure out next? What's he going to challenge me with next? He did things like that. He liked that cat and mouse game. Okay? I personally don't. I can find it interesting and enjoyable and challenging, and I like how it pushes your mind. That's not my style in teaching. I think that there's a role for that. I prefer the more direct approach, where I'm simply going to treat you like an adult that is capable of understanding and explain it as simply as I can as an adult to another adult, and trust that you will get it. You know, I personally don't like playing games like that, but that's me. That's my personality. I'm not saying I can't engage in it and understand what he was trying to do, and I do. So let's look at what some of the conceptual ideas of the term out or getting out in the Thelemic tradition is. And again, realize this ultimately means break down your mental conditioning and get out of the mind control spell that the real dark occult sorcerers have put you under and hold you in. The O, of course, is the egg. We just talked about that. You know, the archetype of the feminine essence, the egg, the feminine creativity, the womb of creation. So that's what the first part is. That's where it has to begin. It has to begin with the desire to bear something new, the potentiality of the zero, the nothing, right? The cosmic egg is pure potentiality, no thing, no physicality. It's the void, the cosmic womb of creation, yin energy, Shakti energy, as they call it in the Indus Valley traditions. This represented the Egyptian goddess Isis, or Nuit as well. N-U-I-T, Nuit, different pronunciations of it, but it represents that pure feminine potentiality, the feminine essence, the no thing from which the everything springs. Truth itself, the universe itself. Again, the universe card in the traditional weight deck has, the world card has the cosmic egg. Okay, that oval, and then the goddess inside of it. You know, beautiful symbology, and it's widely known. This is the number 0. This is the cosmic egg, the feminine essence, the womb of creation, the realm of pure spirit, pure potentiality, the truth itself, and the night sky itself, the universal drapery of the night sky. And again, that was Nut, that was Isis in the Egyptian tradition as well. Beautiful symbology. The U, that's that magnetic force, right? The U looks like a large hand magnet, right? And of course, U represents you. It's the self. It's the higher self. It's not the lowercase s selfish self. You know, it's connection to the higher self, the true soul, the true spirit. U represents union, the first word of the letter of the first letter in the word union. The U represented, again, that sacred bond of the feminine and masculine energy, the two polar points of that magnetic force coming together and creating attraction, creating that alchemical bonding. It was the true will being realized and put into effect. Because it's related with the self. It's the dynamic of self-respect, self-discipline, and ultimately self-mastery. All the symbolism of the letter U in simple English gematria, simple English symbolism. And again, then the T, that was the T is the sacred hammer in Freemasonry, the sacred axe or hammer, Thor's hammer, or the sacred axe, the dual-headed axe of Freemasonry. Huge symbols in ancient shamanism. Is some of the oldest symbolism that exists, and that's why Freemasonry borrowed it into its tradition, which of course stems out of the ancient world and ancient Egypt. Anybody telling you it's only a modern tradition, once again, is either ignorant or lying. So again, this is power. This is force. This is will. The will to move forward, right? So it has to be born out of the heart, right? And then it has to resonate with the self, with the higher self. You have to make that connection to it to receive that sacred feminine energy. It prepares the way. It quiets the mind. It empties oneself and makes you a vessel of pure potentiality, so that then you could come into that sacred union with the sacred masculine essence of the hammer, the axe, Thor's hammer, the sacred dual-headed axe of Freemasonry. Masculine power. What is this? Action. This is courage. This is the will to act. This is stepping into the path of the true will. So it starts with the feminine. It proceeds through that neutral point, which is about the self, the higher connection to the self. And then it expresses through courage and power in the real world, the will in the real world. It's desire to know, but for the reason that you're going to act in wisdom with what you know and understand. Okay, so this is the self in the world, right? Being in the world, but not of it, but acting within the world. The individual monad of consciousness, acting in a place of right power with the hammer, the axe. Again, many different traditions. The Norse tradition had this concept of the sacred hammer or axe that was Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, which I often wear. You know, I have silver ones. I wear this black one recently, which represents the war aspect, because we're at war. You know, in times of being equal, different colors could represent that equality and that equal footing. The black Mjolnir, to me and many others, represents a time of war. And, this is all the male energy. Yang energy in the Eastern traditions. Shiva, of the actual putting forward into the will of one's knowledge and internal aspects. And getting it done. That's the Shiva energy of the Indus Valley tradition. This would have been Horus, the crowned and conquering child in Thelema. In the Egyptian or Cometian tradition, this was the sacred child, the sacred male child of the Trinity, of Isis, Osiris, Horus. So if you looked at this in the combination, you could see the U would then be the Osiris energy. The O is the Isis energy. The T is clearly the Horus energy. And then the U would be the Osiris energy. The blending or the union between those two. And then, of course, this is phallic male energy. All the male energy dynamics are part of this. The Tau cross is what it was referred to in the ancient Eastern traditions and Greek tradition. Of course, this is, again, courage. The male energy, the force that has to guide your actual behavior and will. That you have to conquer your laziness. You have to conquer your apathy. You have to conquer your fear. Not to the extent where you obliterate it. It's still there, but you're acting in spite of it. In spite of it being present, you are still doing the right thing. That's what real courage is. And when you do that, when you put all these dynamics together, then you finally have out. When you have out, then you are able to get out. When you have all of these dynamics working in non-contradiction, right? Look at what we've put here just on one slide. If you understand all of those dynamics, that's all part of us, each as individuals, each and every one of us. However, how many of us are in total contradiction? We're not in unity consciousness when it comes to this. And this is what Thelema is all about. One of my, probably the very next slide is going to totally emphasize that. If we're not in that oneness, the true law of one, unity within the self. See, yes, keep in mind the law of one is about unity of all of us, ultimately coming together and being on the same page as a family of humanity. Is that the law of one? Yes, absolutely it is. But you know what the real law of one is first and foremost before that? Before you get to that level, you have to be unified within the self. And that is what we're talking about here on this slide. Be unified internally first. Most people are not. Most people will lie to themselves about them being unified internally, but they unfortunately are not. And that's the problem, folks. We're operating in internal contradiction. And that's why the mighty forces of the universe are not truly coming to our aid as a species. We're in too much internal contradiction. Let me tell you something, folks. The dark occultists are not in internal contradiction. They are very much operating on one accord, like one body. You know the old Christian song about the union with Christ, right? The Christ energy, the Christos. One bread, one body. They sing this in the Catholic tradition. It's a big song that they sing. What does it mean? It means we're all separate, right? But we're coming together over this thing, and then we're going to operate as one entity, one body, right? That's what the dark occultists have, unfortunately. They operate as if they're one mind. We, on the other hand, are all over the place. None of us are on the same page because we're not uniting over core principles and real core values like objective morality, like natural law, true principles. This is what we have to get on the same page about. When we do that, then we'll get out. We'll get out of the thrall, of the head cage, of the hypnosis, of the mind control, and we'll do the 23 skidoo and get out of the head cage. That's ultimately what we need. And, this is symbology of his time, wording of his time, the way he wanted to play his green language games with people. Crowley was a unique character. He was an enigma. And this is how he did things. Again, behind there, I don't talk about it much. I'm not going to get into every single solitary aspect of it. This is to whet the appetite of the student, folks. We could do 50 classes on Thelema. We could do 50 shows on it, okay? Maybe this will extend into a third show, because I have a lot more that I do want to cover. I want to read from some Thelemic texts as well. So maybe I extend this into a third show and we do a whole call-in show, because there's lots more to talk about. For example, the symbol that I chose to put behind the head cage concepts. This was Crowley's own fraternal brotherhood, his own secret society, if you will. It was called the AA, the Argentum Astrum, or Argentum Astrum in Latin. That means the silver star. So it says here, Sigillum Sanct. Let's see, give me a moment. Let me take the image. Sorry, I want to go back for a minute. Let me just put this on its own slide for a second so I could read it better. Yeah, Sigillum Sanctum Fraternitas AA. So that means the signal of the sacred brotherhood of the silver star. AA stood for Argentum Astrum. So Sigillum Sanctum Fraternitas Argentum Astrum. The seal or sigil of the Holy Brotherhood of the Silver Star. That is the Latin inscription going around it. Then he had the cross in the circle at the top, representing the four corners of, again, the seasons, the four archangels, etc. And then Babylon, and then you see the numbers 77, but then united with the third seven as the base or the foundation. This represented love under will. That will, without that unity of the third seven, would not be in harmony with the true will, but with the third seven it would, forming that sacred feminine egg. And then the god in the pantheon of his pantheon of gods that he created in Thelema was Babylon, which was, again, one of the archangelic consciousnesses that was basically working to bring about the age of Horus and the true will. And again, it's not Babylon, it's something separate than that, energy of, the region of the world that we call Babylon, where a lot of dark occultists and dark occult traditions emerged from, because, obviously an entire other story, but emerged from that area in the Middle East where, again, my research connects non-human intelligence as having visited and gathered there and formed many cities there, and really created the religious traditions and the occult traditions, the systems of money that we have, the systems of government that we have, all created from that area of the world. And that is why many people simply refer to the entire system that we are under as the Babylon system. That is not what we are talking about here. Crowley invented a system, a pantheon of gods in his system. Babylon was one that was a positive energy, and moving people toward the the force of will and the true will. Then there were other ones that were chaotic and worked against that. He talked about Koronzon, which I didn't really plan on getting much into, but to contrast it with Babylon, Koronzon was chaos. It was the force of involution. It was not the force of centropy that works to bring us into alignment with evolutionary will, but it was the force of entropy that wants to hold us back and create chaos and hardship in our lives. The grindstone that we must work against, if you will, Koronzon. And, that's the force that we have to constantly be fighting against. So just wanted to quickly show people some of the symbolism of the Order of the Silver Star, Crowley's own magical society. And again, the septenary, the seven-pointed star. Again, sevens all over the symbolism. That's, again, my occultic, symbolic interpretation of that. Let's jump back into moving on from we were talking about getting out. And I think I covered everything I wanted to cover as part of that concept and, explain why I put that symbolism behind there, which was Crowley's sigil of the silver star. So let's move on to the concept that love is the law. Again, we sort of opened up this entire, expose of Thelemic philosophy with the concept of the true will, and that do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. But then people leave off the second half. Love is the law. Love is the law, right? Emphasize the is here. Love is the law. Love under will. So these are going to be the next two concepts. What does love is the law mean? And what does love under will mean? It's a little bit more complex than what most people make it out to be. But once it is understood clearly and you put it all together, then you'll understand what Crowley was actually referring to by making those statements. You can't separate them. See, when people say, do what thou wilt, you're separating it from the most important parts. Love is the law. Love under will. If you break it from that, it loses its contextual meaning. And then, yes, it can become Satanism. It can become dark occultism. You never separate those things. You never break the first part of the statement off from the second half. Love is the law. Love under will. So, again, here's some of the symbolism of Thelema. This was the title card, actually, the symbolism from the title card. Again, the all-seeing eye, representing the Creator's light and the Creator's law coming into our realm for us to receive, for us to understand, and then align our behavior to it. The sacred feminine energy of the dove, and then the sacred feminine chalice of the sacred heart and the flame, giving birth to the sacred child of right action, being born of one's thoughts and one's emotions, and then the sacred child coming from the womb of creation, the sacred chalice, the holy grail, the sacred cup, the Christos' cup, the sacred heart, right? And then that drives the energy of the will. Okay? So this is the progression. Truth, love, freedom. It's right there. It's right there in the symbolism. Truth is that essence of the Creator. The higher level will, making its law known. But it's for us to listen with a mind that is prepared to receive that truth. And we have to make way for that with the feminine energy. That's the dove, the Holy Spirit. So it's like God the Father is at the top, the Holy Spirit, the dove in the middle, and then God the Son. But again, these even Christian correlations and concepts are allegorical. It's thought, emotion, action, right? It's at the bottom, body, mind at the top, spirit in the middle, the unifier, okay? It's father, mother, child, sacred feminine masculine child because it's representative of right action. Okay, the mother is the dove, the sacred feminine spirit, the bringer of peace, because it's the heart. And then that energy is then infused and gives birth to right action. Action born of the heart-based intelligence and the flame of right action, the will, always represented by fire, flame, etc. Coming from the womb, the chalice, the sacred feminine womb, the Holy Grail. This is the Trinity. Crowley knew all this symbolism. Thelemites know this symbolism if they study it. It's nothing new. Same symbolism we've been talking about since day one. It's consciousness, thought, emotion, action, unified as one in the sacred feminine womb. All within the womb. That external womb shape, that's Nuit itself. That's Nut, right? That is the cosmic egg. Once again, we talked about that over and over already. The archetypal symbolism of creation. The womb, the egg of creation. All within that universal force of potentiality. So just as my wording here on the slide, just as natural law itself is ultimately an expression of creation's love. This is all about love being the law of creation, right? Again, natural law is not a set of constraints to create slavery. This is how the dark occultists see it. It is not that. It is an expression of creation's love for everything within creation, because it is a dynamic that operates such that it puts us on our maximum and most efficient path for evolutionary progress within creation. And there could be no better expression of love than that. Of course, that's what the universe wants for us. That's what the Creator itself wants for us. That this intelligent organizing force wants that maximum path of evolutionary learning, development, and growth for its creation. So just as natural law itself is that force, it is that expression of creation's love, the alignment of one's own personal will to creation's will, to align with and serve natural law. And I have to fix that. Give me a moment. Let's see. The alignment of one's personal will to creation's will is to align with and serve natural law. To align with and serve natural law is an act of love born out of higher consciousness. I apologize for the errors. I clearly should have taken more time to proofread some of these slides. I'll make sure that they are definitely correct when they go to the podcast section this week. Let's jump back into this. So let's see how this rereads again. Just as natural law itself is ultimately an expression of creation's love, the alignment of one's personal will to creation's will, to align with and serve natural law, is an act of love born out of higher consciousness. This form of universal love is actually the very foundational basis of law in the cosmos. Again, because it's our alignment of our personal will to creation's will is simply a mirror image of the Creator putting the higher law of natural law into effect in the universe to guide and direct our evolutionary progress so that we can learn from our mistakes, so we can learn and grow in consciousness of what to do and what not to do. So it may be a little bit of a run-on sentence there, but I think now it makes more sense. And hopefully it will convey the concept that that is what it means that love is the law. Creation's law, called natural law, being in effect is actually an expression of love. And then our alignment to that higher law is also our personal act of love. To put our will into alignment with natural will, to align with natural law and serve natural law, and then ultimately teach it to others so that we can hand this understanding down to future generations of people. That's an act of universal love. That is agape itself. Is not natural law agape itself? Is that not the Creator's ultimate expression of love for the creation? And it is. This is what it means that love is the law. This symbol in Thelema represents agape, love, true love, as we talked about last week. And that is what natural law is. Love is the law. Natural law is the Creator's love. It's agape love. Aligning our will with that force is our act of agape, universal love. They're one and the same. To align one's personal will with the will of creation is to serve natural law, is to align with and serve natural law. They're one and the same. So agape is natural law. Thelema is natural law. Kabbalah is natural law. True Freemasonry is natural law. True Rosicrucianism is natural law. If we get down to the essence, if we strip away earthly identification from how we interpret the tradition, the people in it, the orders, the brotherhoods, all the groups and individuals. You got to strip that away. You got to get down to the principles. You got to get down to the core philosophy. And then ultimately that is the agape form of love to serve and help natural law to be not only continue its expression of love, but to be understood and aligned with. And the only way we're ultimately going to do that is to teach more people about how it operates in the world from a higher perspective, not from some bullshit religious level, not even from some cult-like veneration of Crowley and any other occultists. Who cares about any of that? We have to teach it from a principle perspective, from a philosophical perspective, not a religious tradition perspective. So when we understand that these are equivalents, agape is Thelema, is natural law. That's what is meant by love is the law. What is meant by love under will? It's quite literal. Crowley liked to do these very literal things where you get used to trying to interpret it symbolically and allegorically and through green language, and then occasionally he'll hit you with something that's very quite literal to the point where you think it can't be that literal, can it? The word under literally means underneath. Love underneath the will. Meaning, just think about what that means. If you place something on top of it and it's underneath, that thing on the bottom acts as the foundation that's going to uphold and support the thing you place on top of it. So, if I put my hand on, if I drop this bottle right now, it's going to fall. Gravity's going to pull it down where it's going to fall. Water might spill out, right? But if I place my hand under it, then my hand acts as the support or the foundation for this mass to rest upon as a foundation. Literally, the term love under will meant make love the foundation. Make agape love the foundation. Forget the eros and philos forms of love. I mean, they have their place, clearly. But we're talking about agape love acting as the foundation for our will to then move it forward and serve higher will, to align with and serve the higher will. So literally, put agape love at the bottom as the foundation, meaning don't build anything on top unless that's the foundation, or it's doomed to failure. You're building a new Tower of Babel. Okay? You're building something that has a flawed axiomatic foundation from ground level, from ground zero. And that's not going to stand for very long. So the foundation in the plane of causality has to be agape love. It has to be higher love, true love, universal love, love for truth, love for justice, love for freedom. And that's our foundational basis upon which we build any structure we're going to build on top of that. That's got to be on strong foundational footing in the plane of causality. Then we build the will on top of that. So Thelema gets built on top of agape. It is built on the foundation of agape. And that then becomes the plane of effects that manifest the things that then we're going to experience in the world. So if agape is the plane of causality that we create within, and we use that as our building essence to lay the foundation down for all of our actions, and then we use our will to build our actual physical world foundations that are going to enter the plane of effects, the manifestations in the very real 3D physical world. If those are built on top of agape, then we have firm footing. We have the firm foundation to build the structures that we want to build on top of that. They're going to be on solid ground. If it's not built upon agape, which is higher love, we're on very shaky foundational ground. And we're not really building in the plane of causality then, which is folly, which is madness. We're not going to get the manifestations that we want. This is how the real laws of attraction work. So now if we write this simply as an equation, right? Look at it as a fraction, right? Agape, the foundation, under the will. And we have that dividing line. Look at it as simply we're making a fraction. Okay? What does this equal? Well, do gematria, perform gematria upon Thelema and agape. And we already know what that is. We looked at that last week. It's 93. Each of these represent 93. So if we write it symbolically in numbers, it's 93 under 93, or 93 above 93. What does that equal? Any number over itself written as a fraction is the number 1. There's that unity consciousness. You see, unless you build the things that you're performing with your will and aligning your personal will to the higher will of creation, and unless you're building it upon that firm foundation of higher level love, agape, it's not unity. It's not divided. It will not equal 1. It's not the law of 1. That's why love is the law. That is the law of 1. Love under will also is the law of 1. It literally equals 1. Okay? Numerologically, in gematria terms. So this is that unity consciousness, non-duality, non-contradiction, unified in thought, emotion, and action, enlightened consciousness. Beautiful symbology if it's properly understood. If it isn't properly understood, forget about it. Then people only see numbers and symbols and they don't know what they mean, and they don't understand the conceptual ideas, and they don't understand the allegory, and they think it's all a bunch of nonsense and rubbish. But when it's properly decoded, it presents a rich encoded tradition of principles, of concepts, of philosophy that can help guide one in life. But that's if we quiet our mind enough to truly listen to that voice of wisdom and reason and understand they encoded it like that to challenge the mind. They encoded it like that to keep it secret from people that want to destroy it. You know, I understand the reasons for occulting things. I don't personally agree with them in the time we are living in. So let's move on. Let's take a look at one of the seminal pieces of writing in Thelema, what Crowley and other Thelemites called in the occult tradition the Manifesto of Thelema. This was the Thelemic Manifesto, you could call Liber Az. And you know, you have another different incarnation of the seven-pointed star. You have the crescent moons creating, you know, a trinity that is upholding the sun the symbol of the sun, which obviously is a symbol of, again, the Trinity. The star could represent Osiris, the moons could represent Isis, and then the sun represents Horus, the conquering child in Thelema. Enclosed by the O, again, the feminine womb, the womb of pure potentiality, creation itself, the universe itself, the boundary conditions of natural law. And then again, you have the OZ representing the Wizard of Oz. This is also a green language symbolism to the wizard I was, right? The Wizard of Oz, the wizard I was, right? That's the holy guardian angel concept, Crowley's holy guardian angel named I was. You have the beast concept, 666, there at the bottom, that has to be ultimately conquered by the crowned and conquering child Horus, represented by the sun, the dot with the circle around it, which is, again, drawn with the compass of Freemasonry, the point in the middle, and then we draw the circle around that with the compass. Again, the compass is symbolic in Freemasonry of higher consciousness and right action, circumscribing the square, base consciousness, but also informing us that we have to place our actions firmly upon the square, upon right foundation that is ruled by the compasses, compassion, heart-based intelligence, true will. Lots of symbolism right in the symbology of the book Liber Oz, but the biggest symbolism is the word itself. Oz, when turned on its side, forms the word on. If we just simply rotate 90 degrees, on. And then if you read that backwards, it's no. So you not only have the concept of the Wizard of Oz, which was a theosophical allegory written by Frank Baum. L. Frank Baum, a theosophist himself, wrote the books about the Wizard of Oz to convey the occult philosophy of theosophy about the unification of our thoughts, emotions, and actions. The Wizard of Oz, I have a breakdown of the Wizard of Oz allegorically. I call it everything I learned in life I learned by watching the Wizard of Oz. And in that, I break down the theosophical allegory presented in Baum's books and the movie based on them that is about rediscovery of the soul, rediscovery of the self, who Dorothy represents, her guardian angel being Toto, an animal spirit, an animal totem, Toto, and she going through the land of Oz, which is ultimately representative of the self and the soul's journey in the universe, here on Earth, and her encountering the scarecrow who wants a brain representing thoughts, the Tin Man who wants a heart representing emotions, heart-based intelligence, and then the Cowardly Lion wanting courage representing the will to act in the world through his will rightly. Thought, emotion, action. Not hard to figure out if you look at it from a allegorical, symbolic perspective and a perspective of an occult tradition. Most people see this as just a simple child's tale, which it is not. It is about the unification of consciousness. And that unification brings enlightenment. The word for light and the sun, depicted there by the circle and the dot, in the Egyptian/Cometian tradition was On. On was the city of the sun, literally Heliopolis. And enlightenment is the light of the mind being turned on. Flicking the switch to the on position. Illumination. And we reverse those letters. It's a mirror for the word no. The lost word of Freemasonry. The word no is the word of all power, whereby we take back our power and our rights from usurpers, from dark occultists, from people who think that they're our masters, who would dare to say that they're the masters and owners of other people. No is the word by which we will take our rights and our freedom back. When we refuse to cooperate in any form with evil. When we refuse to budge 1 millimeter of ground for evil. when we have no tolerance for evil creeping into our lives and taking ground in our lives. And that is what Liber Raz is ultimately all about. Once again, people won't hear it correctly. If it's not for you, you probably won't understand it. You'll probably insist you have a better interpretation than what it really means. But we'll read it and reflect what it really means, regardless of what you or anyone else thinks. I'm going to give people the truth of what something really actually means and represents in the real world. If you have a different interpretation of what I'm really about to lay out, I'm going to tell you you're simply wrong. I've studied it more in depth than you. I understand it better. I have the correct interpretation, and I have the interpretation by which it was actually meant to be distributed and given out into the world from the Thelemic philosophy point of view as the manifesto of Thelema. I don't really give a shit whether you believe that or not. You could accept that or not accept it. It's still true. So I'm going to come right at people like that with a hard-ass, in-your-face, confrontative mode. Because there are certain things that are just objectively true. And people want to refute them and want to try to say that they're not, and they're just wrong. And it's because they're just dumb. And they haven't looked at it deeply enough. And they haven't studied it obsessively enough to understand the real meaning. So let's clear it up once and for all. And let's put it out there once and for all the fucking dunces out there. This is what Liber Raz really means. This is what it really is about. Pay attention and you'll learn something. Empty the mind. Get all the chatter out about the mind, about what you've been told and about what you think you know. You've probably been told from people who don't know shit and who think they know. And they're as dumb as dog shit about what they think they know. As opposed to people who are real students and borderline obsessive students about it, that delve into it so deeply till they get to the point where they definitively know. This is what it means to drink deeply from the Pierian spring of knowledge. Not to sip from it. To be filled with that essence of knowledge. Through obsessive, borderline hard work and taking in eclectic varieties of information and applying the trivium process to it. So let's read the Thelemic Manifesto and break it down philosophically. He starts with quotes and ends with quotes from the Book of the Law, Liber Alvel Legis, which is the expanded Thelemic philosophy, the book which defined Thelema, you could say. Very allegorical, very numerological, very symbolic. He lays out pretty much natural law in that. He lays out what the true will is. He lays out true love. He lays out his pantheon of gods, characters which represent archetypal aspects of the personality and of nature, which could be seen as even corollaries to the major arcana of the tarot and or the Sephirot on the Tree of Life in Kabbalah. You could see tons of correspondences to all of that by studying the Book of the Law, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But let's read this. He starts with quotes from Book of the Law, Liber Alvel Legis, and he says, "The law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world." So once again, he's delineating between people with knowledge and people without knowledge. The law of the strong literally means the strong are those who have truly understood how natural law operates. The weak are going to be people that insist it doesn't exist and or are ignorant of its operation, and so their life is going to be chaotic. They're going to be constantly encountering the Coron zone energy. They're not going to get in touch with the Holy Guardian Angel. They're not going to get in touch with the true will. And every action is going to be a war Every action is going to be something that gets in their way and acts as a hindrance and holds them back and constrains them and doesn't open their potential. And that's why certain people, when they work with this information, they become stronger spiritually. Life opens up. Potentiality opens up. Manifestation starts to flow. They step into the slipstream of creation, and by doing the true will. By living the selfish will, you're assisting the dark force, the entropic force, the force of involution that holds us back. And he's saying, knowing this is the joy of the world. Really, truly receiving natural law is the good news. It should be reason to actually be happy, to celebrate, to be in a state of gratitude. I'm not in gratitude about the situation around me, right? That's horror. The situation of the real world, the events going on in the world is horror. It's a horrible place. It's in a horrible condition. But the joy of the world and the gratitude that one can feel internally is that I personally, as an individuated monad, an individuated aspect of consciousness, am not in that level of ignorance. The good news is that I understand how it really operates. I understand the real working. And I can align my behavior to it and prosper. I can align my behavior to it and evolve and grow. And not be like the weak. Not be like the people who are remaining in abject, willful ignorance. And the only people they're hurting is themselves. But they are hurting others, actually. It's not really the only people they're hurting. You could say that as a phrase like, you're just creating suffering for yourself. But the real answer is they're creating suffering not only for themselves, but for other people around them. Because unfortunately, we are connected together as the law of one dictates. See, if everybody could just go to their own place and be as ignorant as they want, live as enslaved as you want, great. Go ahead and do it. Unfortunately, that's not the issue. That's why I have a moral problem with it, is you're connected to me. You're connected with other people who do want freedom, who do want justice. And that ignorance is a source of harm. It's a source of creating negative manifested expressions in the world for others, not just for yourself, because we are all connected. But the good news is we are the ones doing that. And if we do get on the same page by an act of our will and by the act of the will of people who do know it and then teach it to others and make our voices heard, the good news is we can change it. This isn't being done to us. We are doing it to ourselves. And that's coming up later in this document. Next, he says, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And of course, we've talked about what that means. Align your will to the will of creation, and forces of creation will come to your assistance, and obstacles will be removed from your life path if you find that true purpose and path in life. And right now, that's the same for everyone here. It's not, they'll say it's a unique expression. But right now, the end goal is the same for everybody. You could do it differently, but you're attempting to create the same end result, which is the great work of ending slavery. Because if slavery is present, why would you ever want to do anything else? If slavery is present, the number one thing you have to do is free yourself and get out of slavery. And if your actions are aligned to any other result, the universe is not going to be good to you. It's not going to create effortlessness and flow in your life because you're saying I'm okay with slavery for myself and others. And there's no lower form of consciousness than that. That's not the true will. That's not love. So all things being equal, as we said, the true will could have many different end results and goals and paths and, expressions for everyone. But when there's slavery taking place, the true will, the end goal of the true will is the same for everyone. To ways of doing it, ways of expressing the true will be different for each individual. But we're all working toward the same end result. Freedom. Freedom first, then endless other expressions and, differentiation. But slavery has to go first, folks. You know, this idea of government is not going to allow humanity to evolve to higher levels of expressions in consciousness. It wants us stuck here forever and going backwards and devolving. You know, and they're waging mental war, psi war. They're waging bio war, biophysical war, and they're waging spiritual war. 3 types of war going on. Oh, and if they have to, they'll wage physical war. So you could say 4. There's spiritual war ultimately. Then there's psi war, war in the mind. You know? You could say there's emotional manipulation. There's, emotive war. And there's biophysical war through all the chemicals that they're bombarding us with. Frequencies. So you have psi war, you have bio war, and you have physical war. All being used and employed by the dark occultists to keep us in this hell world, this prison that we've built for ourselves. So we talked about do what thou wilt, aligning our own will to the will of creation, doing the true will to then actually accomplish the great work of ending human slavery here on earth. The next line from the book of the law is, thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that and no other shall say nay. So once again, this is the idea that to do the will is a bond. It's the strictest possible bond as it's been described. This is the first and utmost, utter, ultimate right. Crowley says, thou has no other right but to do the will of creation. When you start to try to do all your other frivolous wants and desires and base desires and just fulfill those base earthly, worldly needs at the expense of doing the true will, all obstacles arise. He says, do the true will and no other shall say nay. You won't have resistance in your life if your behavior is actually aligned to the true will. And then the last quote before he enters the document proper is from the book of the law once again. Every man and every woman is a star. And so this is representative of sovereignty. The star, especially the 5-pointed star, again, the upright pentacle or pentagram, has always been seen as the symbol of a man or woman, with the head and the 4 extremities, the arms and the legs representing earth, air, water, and fire, the physical elements, and then the head representing spirit, the consciousness, the mind, the 5th element, and then the hub in the center, directly connected to the heart energy. And this is what it means that, the 55-pointed stars on the American flag represents the sovereignty of the 50 states. And ultimately it should represent the sovereignty of the people. Crowley's directly talking about the sovereignty of the individual. The star has been a traditional archetypal symbol of sovereignty for these reasons. And he's saying every man and every woman is a sovereign being. A star, symbolically. And then in the Cometian or the ancient Egyptian tradition, their concept of dying and going into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, they would encounter the testing of the soul, whereby you went into the chamber of the goddess Ma'at, and Anubis guided you there, the farrier of the dead in the Duat, and then there would be Thoth, the scribe of your deeds, and a scale, and a heart and a feather, one of Ma'at's feathers, and then the heart of the soul of the dead would be weighed against the feather. And if it was as light or lighter than the feather, representing that one had truly heart-based intelligence and lived according to righteousness and aligned their will with the will of creation and aligned their behavior to what was truly objectively right and didn't initiate harm to others. That is the lightness of the heart. It doesn't mean you're just lighthearted and giddy and not serious all the time. That's not what it means. Lightheartedness in this aspect meant that your heart was pure from a perspective of you looked at deeds that were harmful that you may have engaged in previously. You desisted in that. You repented for that. You didn't engage in those practices anymore, and then your heart became light. Beautiful allegorical symbolism. If the heart, on the other hand, was impure and outweighs the feather, it goes into the mouth of Amit, the destroyer, the like crocodile type spirit. And then you were recycled back into the world until you learned the lessons you needed to. If, on the other hand, you did not, you were given the choice. Do you want to go and help others, or do you want to go out into the wider world of the universe and experience life from a different level of consciousness? And it was said that if one chose that path, they extended out of, through light into other areas of the cosmos, and you were reborn as a star somewhere else in another solar system, and that you, because you learned those lessons, could help through the light of that star act as a beacon of enlightenment for other souls that would then be satellites of yourself in a new solar system. So it's a beautiful allegorical tradition and story from the ancient Egyptian, again, the Cometian tradition. And again, Crowley's referencing it here by saying every man and woman is a star. We have the potential to have that type of light within us and be reborn in that, again, that Egyptian cosmology as a star, literally, which represents sovereignty. The stars of the night sky of Nuit's cloak, represents sovereign beings under the creator of the universe, God's sons and daughters, all sovereign, all equal in our natural rights, all having the potential to project the light of the creator of the universe and give that to others to create more light. So that's just the preamble from quotes from the Book of the Law. Now the document starts in earnest. There is no God but man. Once again, we talked about that. That does not mean man is God. Okay? So non-initiates to the Thelemite tradition will immediately read that wrongly. Look at it again. It's a small g in the word God and a capital M in the word man. If it were reversed and the G were capital and the M were lowercase, now you have it's tantamount to blasphemy. It's tantamount to claiming to be God, like a dark occultist, like a Satanist. There is no lowercase God creator of our experience collectively here on earth other than mankind itself. Humanity itself is the creator of its experience through consequentialism, through natural law. The behavior you put back is what's going to trigger the consequences that you receive. Not that hard to understand. Natural law in a nutshell right there. There's no lowercase g, small g creator other than humanity itself. All human beings in the aggregate, mankind. Humankind. I would write that as there is no creator of humanity's experience other than humanity itself. That's it. And people will argue this till the end of the universe itself, until the stars die out of existence. People will say, no, I have the better interpretation and you're wrong, Mark. You don't know what you're talking about, and I do. Dumb as a sack of fucking sand. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Period. I have the correct interpretation. I'm reading it correctly. You are not reading it correctly. You are ill-read when it comes to the tradition of Thelema. You are acting in haste judgment and speaking something that you don't understand. Not me. I understand it and I have it correct. You are the one who has it wrong. And again, believe whatever the fuck you want. You're still incorrect and I'm still telling the truth. Let's get that fucking totally clear. All right? So now the document begins in paragraph form, truly in earnest. That's the qualifier at the top. That this is how natural law works. We either understand how it works or we create unconsciously. But nobody else is doing it truly to us from the outside. We're creating it ourselves. We're inflicting the self-inflicted suffering by not saying no to evil. We're inflicting the self-inflicted suffering of the human condition by not learning objective morality and aligning our behavior to it. Let's get that clear. It's not something that is external. You could talk about the Illuminati, you could talk about the dark occult, you could talk about aliens all day, every day, and ultimately they're not really the ones in control. The creator of the universe is ultimately in control, and that force is going to grant us the power we require to free ourselves when we get on the same fucking page and understand objective morality and natural law, align our behavior to it through an act of our true will and true love. Period. The end. For all time. And that's contained in that one sentence. There's no God but man. Understand what it means, and then you could correctly, truly interpret it. Instead of acting in hasty, quick judgment, you thinking you know, and you don't know shit. You know what somebody else told you when they were equally just as fucking dumb and ill-read. That's the problem with the whole Thelemic tradition. I'm going to try not to get too ultra-confrontative, but it really does piss me off to no end when people talk out their ass and they have no direct knowledge of the thing. They've never studied it. They've never read it in depth. And let me tell you something. You can't just read this and think you understand Thelema, first of all. I'm presenting you again this whole series on this occult tradition is to simply whet your appetite to really read into it on your own. Obviously, if we really did that, it would be 50 to 100 shows or more. You know, the whole What on Earth is Happening podcast series is not just going to be on Thelema, nor is it just going to be on Freemasonry or just on Rosicrucianism. We've touched on these topics, but you have to do the reading yourself. I could point you to the books, but you got to read them and understand them. You have to read other interpretations. You have to read biographies and autobiographies and the actual philosophy from those who formulated it. And I don't mean just a piece of it. You know, this is the concrescence of it in one document. That's not going to get you there. You got to read all of the details and minutia of it and go over it multiple times to understand it. This is what the serious student does. They don't read one thing and think they understand it. They read all of it and then go over it multiple times till they gain a deep understanding of it. See, that's what eclectic and obsessive research and study really is. You exhaust the topic. Most people won't do that because it's an incredible investment of time and effort and energy and sacrifice. And that's what love is. Making that effort. That's why they call it a labor of love. To make that effort is to do the will. To exercise that form of agape love, higher consciousness love, unconditional universal love. For truth, for justice, for knowledge, for how things really work, for natural law, for objective morality, is Thelema. To use the will. To put your path in life on the ultimate universal path of the creation's will. Very, very, very few people aligning with that path. Very few people understand Thelema from that perspective. Even people calling themselves Thelemites don't understand it. Because you know what they are? They're fucking Crowleyites. Their paying reverence and homage to the man instead of to the philosophy, instead of to the principles that are conveyed. And that doesn't make one a Thelemite. That makes one a jackass. All right? Let's get that clear. To all the so-called, to the fake-ass Thelemites out there. Because, again, there's fake-ass anarchists, there's fake-ass Freemasons, there's fake-ass Rosicrucians, there's fake-ass Christians, there's fake-ass Muslims, there's fake-ass Jews, there's fake-ass Thelemites that don't know a goddamn thing about Thelema. They want to impress somebody by getting all involved in the trappings of it and the rituals and going to the lodge system and say, oh, I'm so into Crowley. Who gives a fuck? Do you know what Thelema really is? Could you explain the tradition the way I did in in less than 2 episodes? Probably not. Which means you really don't know shit. And you haven't really gotten it from a deep perspective. So let's now read the paragraphs of Liber Oz and break them down. Paragraph 1. Man has the right, capital R, to live by his own law, capital L. Now that doesn't mean do whatever you want. That means you have the right to live according to natural law, capital L. Your natural right is the law, is natural law, capital L. So you have the right to live within the boundary conditions of natural law, and no one has the right to truly stop you from living within those boundary conditions. And this is what is done criminally all the time by human beings, because most human beings are thieves. And other people then support the thieves from thieving people's natural rights and freedom and their free will and coercing them and putting them under duress and ultimately doing physical violence to them, initiating harm. So man has the right, capital R, natural rights, to live according to natural law, objective morality, to live in the way that he wills to do, capital W, will, meaning not doing whatever you want, but to align your way of life to creation's will for the beings, the sovereign beings within creation, meaning to respect others' sovereignty, to respect their free will, to respect their rights, to respect their rights to live under natural law, free from aggression and the initiation of harm willfully by other people. So he's outlining the equality of everyone under natural law in these first 2 sentences and saying that we have no other rights except those that are prescribed by natural law, which means don't do the things that are transgression against natural law: murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, and deception. The true 7 deadly sins. Stay out of the areas of those forms of theft, and you will be acting within your rights, and that is what it is your right to do under natural law. Not that hard to understand, actually. You know, people giving it incorrect interpretations because they don't know enough is the problem. That's why Thelema gets obfuscated, and that's what the dark occultists want, because this is the last thing they want anybody understanding, because that's the end of their power. That's the end of their thrall. That's the end of their mind control, their dark occult influence over the minds of human beings, if people truly wake up to the power of a philosophical tradition like this. To work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. All capital W's, all in alignment with the true will of creation. Not to do the selfish will in any of those things. Totally different from saying do whatever kind of work you want, even if it doesn't align with natural law. That's not what is being said in Liber Oz, right? So the first form of it, to work as he will. That doesn't mean enter any field of work that you want. That means enter a field of work that is in alignment with the will of creation, that is right livelihood. The Buddhist concept of right livelihood, which we've talked about on What on Earth is Happening in past episodes. To work as one wills, meaning capital will W, doesn't mean go into the pharmaceutical industry and sell everybody poison. It doesn't mean go be a cop and take people's rights when you're ordered to and be a dumb order follower. It means align your work to the capital W will of creation. And then you'll be doing right livelihood, and that is in alignment with natural law and the true will. Same thing with the rest of them. Obviously, we all need forms of play, entertainment to align, keep our body in homeostasis and equilibrium, that we don't lose it and go into ill forms of health. Same with rest. You have to balance work and rest. And everyone is sovereign over their own body. We have bodily autonomy. We live in the way we will. We work the way we will. Play and rest the way we will. All having to do with the self and the body. And then to die and end our lives as we see fit. This means no one has the right to tell you, what you can really do with your own body, including if you're suffering and you do want to end your life, that's within your rights to do so. Everybody has full bodily autonomy and control over what they're going to do with their body. I don't think it's a good decision to start harming your body, but your body belongs to you while your consciousness inhabits it. Nobody owns anything forever. We're not talking about eternal ownership. Your consciousness, your spirit, has possession of your body. It inhabits and lives in the body while you're in physicality. That means you own your body and you have bodily autonomy to do as you see fit with it. Paragraph number 2. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. These are the natural universal rights to use your body as you see fit, put into it what you want. Obviously, attempt to align that with the true will. Again, they're all capital W, meaning you start doing things that break down the mind, pollute the body, don't lead to understanding, and you make those habitual. Never saying don't eat a piece of chocolate cake, never saying don't have a beer, never saying, don't do things that do bring you physical pleasure. It's saying what you do most of the time. You're aligning that to your higher purpose, to your true will. That means, don't become a drug addict. You're not going to be doing the true will. Don't, become a total alcoholic where you're ruining your health and you're in and out of hospitals. You're not aligning that with true will. That's not going to be conducive to doing the true will. So learn how to nourish the body properly and take care of it. And, to move as we will on the face of the earth. Travel is a human right. The idea of constraining where people can and can't go through invisible boundaries and borders is a concept of statism. Now, I get it. Flooding countries with, immigrants that are not in that cultural, background and trying to, basically bring the internal dynamics of the country down is a tactic. It's a part of the agenda. People do that. Globalists do that. But again, all things being equal and governments not, artificially creating these types of borders and things like that, people have the right to go wherever they want. Borders of countries are imaginary lines, as long as someone is not physically hurting somebody. See, the problem is it's for a political agenda to hurt other people. That's what all of the forced immigration that we see in the world is accomplishing and doing. They're bringing people in who don't align with the real values of the original intent of the country and its traditions, and then getting them to just vote a certain way so that there's more political power in a particular party. That's what all the artificial movement of people around the globe are, in the form of refugees, etc., and immigrants. I can't remember his name, but there was a gentleman who explained immigration and trying to solve problems by moving people around with gumballs. And he showed how much immigration happens visually with total percentage, with total ratio, using gumballs in this video. And he showed you're not helping people by doing that. You're moving a tiny amount of people. People are best served where they are. If you want to help people, help them where they already live. Help them where they are. Uplift and raise consciousness. Uplift and raise that culture. Not all cultures are the same. All human rights are the same. Not all cultures are equal. Some are fallen. Just like not all religious traditions are equal. Some are more fallen than others. Not all occult traditions are equal. Some are more fallen than others. We can't equate everything. We can't say everything is equal. It's not. Human rights are equal. That's total equality. That is sameness. Everybody has the same rights everywhere. They want to make sameness in individuality. For each individual, they want them the same. They want them in the same layer of mediocrity. They want cultures all to be the same, all governed by satanic globalists. I apologize for the noise outside. I don't have control over a truck backing up, folks. So we'll just have to deal with it and work through it. But I just want to say I believe in individual right to travel, to move as we will on the face of this planet. Paragraph number 3. Man has the right to think what he will. Autonomy in mind, of course. To speak what he will. To write what he will. To draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will. To dress as he will. This is all the individual creative aspects of the being that no one has the right to take away. And we want to set up 1,000,000 laws and restrictions. See, that's all evil ultimately is. Evil is continuous restriction upon human freedom and rights. That's evil. And if you're for that, you're serving the force of evil. You're serving the very essence of evil, the heart of evil. That is what the involutionary force, Shatan in the Hebrew tradition, the adversary, the opposer, the force of evil that wants to destroy humanity and destroy human consciousness, is always working to do, to create more and more justifications through fear to continue to constrain rights more and more and more. And that is the great deception of Satan. It's a force. It's not, I don't look at it as an entity like they do in the Christian tradition. This was Apollyon, the concept of Apollyon in the Greek tradition, not Apollo, Apollyon. This was in the Egyptian tradition. This was Apophis, right? It was called Satan in the Hebrew tradition and then in the Christian tradition. But this is Apophis, the destroyer, the adversary of humanity, the adversary of the light, the adversary of Amen-Ra in the Egyptian tradition. This is Set in the later Egyptian tradition, who conquers Horus and puts him into the underworld where they do battle, and Horus eventually has to conquer the negative influence of Set and rise back on the Horus zone, the horizon, in the morning. Again, representing the battle between light and darkness, the battle between good and evil, the battle between freedom and the restriction of freedom. That is what all the dark archetypal gods throughout history represented. To restrict freedom is to perform evil. You don't have that right. Everybody has the natural right to live according to their natural rights. And when one restricts that, that is coercion. When one restricts that, that is duress. And one physically restricts it, that is violence. Paragraph number 4. So again, this third paragraph is all about the creative rights of humankind, of humanity, of people. We can exercise the creative expressions that we want to use to bring about the great work, to bring about the true will, and in other ways. Nobody can stop us. Nobody should have the power or the right to stop us from those types of creative expressions that are explained there in paragraph 3 of Liber Oz. Paragraph 4, man has the right to love as he will. This means if there is consensual sexuality, it is a human right. Stop trying to constrain other people's sexuality. As long as they are not harming anybody and the acts are of mutual consent with consenting adults, sexuality should be unrestrained and should be nobody's business except the people who are involved in the mutual consensual acts. This is why religion has their head up their ass when it comes to what they think sexuality should be. It's none of their business. This is ridiculous notions of things that have no bearing on morality unless rape comes into play or sexual abuse of children comes into play, because they're too young to make the informed decision to consent to a sexual act. That's why you don't involve children in sexuality. They're still developing. They're still learning about what their sexuality or their sexual orientation is going to be, their sexual likes and dislikes and preferences, etc. Obviously, a certain amount of education should be involved in that when the child is of age, coming into puberty and beginning to understand, having the capability of understanding those things, but it shouldn't be foisted onto very young children. And that's a big agenda today. Swerving and moving, shuffling around and creating this whole idea of fluidity with so-called gender, I think that's messing around with children. I'm not saying that people are not free to choose their own whatever orientation they wish to choose for themselves. That's their own right and their own free will. What I'm saying is you begin attempting to foist that on the children, it creates a lot of internal confusion within them. And a lot of people will take exception to this. Go right ahead. The bottom line with it is let the child develop naturally and make their own informed decisions by giving them certain base information when they're old enough to understand. This is common sense, folks. There's nothing radical being said there. That's a very common sense, normal, natural approach to human sexuality and teaching it to children. And that's how parents have basically done it for aeons. And now there is an agenda to try to twist that all up, get people very confused. And people confused about identity and sexuality can become part of an overarching wider agenda to damage other people and even to normalize things like pedophilia, which is another big part of the agenda that they want when it comes to sex. But this paragraph, that's the end of the paragraph proper. There is another quote underneath it. But the paragraph is simply one line. Man has the right to love as he will. Very simple. Very common sense. If it's consensual and mutual, it's voluntary, it's a right. Don't get involved in other people's sexuality, but don't push agendas of sexuality onto very young children. Leave them alone. Let them come through the formative years naturally. And when they hit early puberty, you could start having that discussion with them, which is when it's very appropriate and natural to do. Obviously, young children could have questions. You explain it in a simplified way, but you don't want to overly sexualize young children. It's very common sense. And no one should be hearing that as, speaking out against anyone's right to self-identity or sexual orientation. That's obviously your natural right to do that. Children do have to be protected to a certain extent when it comes to learning about human sexuality until they're old enough to take that responsibility on in a healthy way. Because if it's done too quickly or abruptly or according to an agenda, it can create psychological problems and trauma for the child, which we want to avoid doing that to young children. So I think I've explained my position quite clearly on that, and that's that paragraph. Now let's look at the quote underneath it. It says, take your fill and will of love as ye will, when, where, and with whom ye will. This means the restriction upon love and sexuality by religions, by political forces, is not right and should not be done. We have the right to express our feelings for other people as we choose, so long as the acts are voluntary and consensual and mutual between all parties involved. Not that hard to understand, and this is what those quotes actually mean. And now, of course, dealing with a damn drill outside in the tight quarters of South Philadelphia, I have to attempt to explain the most important part of Liber Oz and get around the distraction, which of course has to be there on a Sunday afternoon of all times. They can't take the break on a Sunday because I'm doing my show, so not saying that's necessarily deliberate, but let's power through it. If I have to raise my voice a little, so be it. Paragraph number 5, the be-all and end-all of Liber Oz, the part that puts it all together. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. Now let's read that again and look at the simplicity of the statement, but look at the qualification of the statement. Man has the right, capital R, natural right, to kill, not murder, to kill, to end the aggression, the initiation of violent aggression. The word kill, which is what that means in that context. Those who would thwart these rights. It doesn't even say, it's such a radical statement about the right existing to kill those who would thwart these rights, that notice the statement is not, man has the right to kill those who are thwarting his rights presently. It doesn't even say that. It's more extreme than that. It says man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. Meaning, if they even express the idea that they want to curtail other people's rights in these regards, and in really any other regard that man has the natural right to do something, to engage in a behavior, and other people say, I think that should be put down and stopped, and I would have people come with violence to do that. You've already opened up the right to be taken out of existence. You've already forfeited your own right to live. And I fully agree. I fully agree with that statement. Leave other people alone. Stop fucking with other people's rights. You don't have the right to do it, motherfucker. That's all it comes down to. And if you do it, you forfeit your own life. You forfeit your life. Instantaneously, in the snap of a fingers. And the person who you're doing that to has a right to end you. And again, I'm not saying for them to immediately do that. I'm saying that the right exists in nature. At the time we are living in, it may be a very bad idea to exercise that right immediately, but it exists. No question of its existence. And what Crowley is writing here in Liber Oz is that the right exists even before the action is taken physically to destroy others' rights, to kill the people who would agree to do it. Meaning, if in the mental domain you are just stating your intent that you would be the usurper and destroyer of a natural right of humanity, you deserve to die. You deserve to die. And that other people have a right to end your physical existence merely for the fact that you believe that bullshit in your own mind. That you would not even have to take that action. But by simply expressing it, you forfeit your life. And it's null and void. Until you revoke that statement and say, I no longer think that, and I was wrong forever thinking it. And I absolutely agree. And guess what? That's going to be a hard, bitter fucking pill to swallow for most jackasses out there. And go ahead. Have as difficult of a time swallowing it as you want. Say you disagree. Say, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's still true. It's still the truth. And guess what? That's the highest expression of spirituality that exists, believe it or not. This statement is all you really need to understand. And I know I'm going to alienate people. Guess what? Who gives a fuck? It's still true. Turn it off. Turn the show off. Go watch and listen to something else. Go put the fucking football game on. Who gives a fuck what you do? I'm here for the strong. I'm not here for the dross. Fuck the dross. This is the law of the strong and the joy of the world. Okay? This is the actual good news because it's the truth. It's real. It's true. It's nature's law. It's the law of nature and it's natural law. This is the law of the creator of the universe that they don't want you to understand. Your rights don't come from man. When man steals them, he's forfeit his own. That's it. Your rights don't come from mankind. They come from the creator of the universe. Once somebody tries to steal your rights, they forfeit their life. That's the bottom fucking line of all of it. That's what we're here on this earth to learn. That's the ultimate expression of truth and spirituality ever written by man. Ever penned in one sentence. It's all you need to know. You remember I don't know if anybody, I'm a pro wrestling fan. I'll inject some humor here. Some people know that. Some people would find that humorous. But I've been a wrestling fan since I was 5 years old. And I still, occasionally watch and I still generally follow it and go to matches sometimes. However, there was an old wrestler named Baron von Raschke, I guess German or Austrian. His big move was the claw, right? He'd put his hand out like that. He'd grab onto somebody's head and face, press their temples, make them tap out, make them submit from the pressure he's putting on their skull with his hand. His hand said he had like a vice grip with his hand. And he would go like this and he'd say, the claw is all the people need to know. The claw is all the people need to know. Liber az is all the people need to know. That's it. In the words of Baron von Raschke, Liber az is all the people need to know. One time I put a meme out on social media. I had an old image of Baron von Raschke doing the clause, all the people need to know thing. He'd go like that. And I put Liber az in it. And I wrote as the caption, Liber az is all the people need to know. I thought it was pretty funny. People would have to be an old wrestling fan to understand it from way back. To even know von Raschke. But my point is, this is actually the be-all and end-all of spiritual expression. And if you really understand it, it does truly equate to actual spiritual enlightenment and the understanding of natural law. That's why so many people have a hard time with it, because they don't understand natural law. They don't understand the rights of man. Meaning humanity, mankind. Obviously not gender men, okay? When I say man, I'm talking about capital M man, like at the top of this document. Mankind, humanity, all human beings. As soon as someone attacks the sovereignty of another soul, their life is forfeit. Until they reject that position, then they could be taken back into the human fold and treated with their rights intact. But if someone even expresses, I want to curtail the rights of other sovereign beings, as far as the universe is concerned, that's an actionable, expressed thought. Those are fighting words. That's not protected speech and thought at that idea. That's why I've always said I'm not a total speech absolutist. I'm totally for free speech. But as soon as you start saying you're going to do harm to somebody, or harm should be done to a person who acts in a certain way within their rights, that's where I say you don't have the right to do that. So we'll pick this up on the other side. I'll finish with this document next week. We'll continue with another couple of recommendations for Thelemic readings, and then we'll go to your calls for the duration of the time, and that will conclude our mini-series here on the Thelemic philosophy. Thank you all for watching this week. That's all the time we have. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, government is slavery. And we'll see you right here on What on Earth is Happening next week.